Hello, everyone. Get ready for an exciting story of friendship and courage. Today, we're going to tell the story of Max, the hero dog, who, along with his owner John, faced mysterious caves to save little Emily. Want to know what they discovered? Don't miss this adventure. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and comment where you're watching from. Let's embark on this journey together. What happens when a simple walk in the woods turns into a journey that can change lives forever? John, a young dreamer, always sought adventure in the lush forests of Asheville, but he never imagined that, alongside his loyal dog Max, he would find not only a mystery but also a connection that would challenge him to overcome his deepest fears. John was an ordinary boy, but he carried within him a burning desire to discover the world beyond his small town. Since he was little, he dreamed of being an explorer, but life never made things easy for him. With an absent father and a mother who worked hard to support the household, he often felt lonely, as if he were in a dark cave from which he couldn't escape. Max, his loyal dog, was his only friend and adventure companion, always by his side, ready to move forward, even when the challenges seemed greater than they were. One afternoon, while exploring an infrequently traveled trail, Max began to act strangely. The dog, with his keen sense of smell, seemed to catch something in the air that John couldn't understand. Intrigued, John decided to follow him, ignoring the feeling that something was about to change. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the surroundings became increasingly oppressive. The tall, dense trees seemed to whisper secrets, and the sunlight barely reached the leaf-covered ground. Soon, they discovered a hidden cave among the rocks. The entrance was narrow and dark, but John's curiosity and sense of adventure urged him to enter. Once inside, the atmosphere changed drastically. The darkness was profound, and the echo of their footsteps resonated as a reminder that they were alone in that mysterious place. However, what awaited them was something that would test not only John's courage but also his ability to overcome the traumas that haunted him. Inside the cave, they found Emily, a girl who appeared to be lost. She was hurt and scared, and upon seeing her, something within John awakened. He remembered his own struggles and loneliness, feeling an instant connection with the girl. The urgency to get her back to her parents became his new objective, but the journey would not be easy. They soon realized that the cave held more secrets than they imagined, including a secret chamber filled with ancient relics and an inexplicable power that could change their lives forever. As John, Max, and Emily pressed on, the conflict intensified. They needed to face not only the physical challenges of the forest and the cave, but also the internal doubts that arose with each step. John questioned his own ability to be a hero, while Emily struggled with the fear of never seeing her family again. Together, they formed an unlikely friendship, joining forces to confront the unknown. As they explored the mysteries of the cave, John encountered a philosophical question that had followed him since childhood. How far would he go for those he loves? What truly mattered in life? These questions became fundamental in his journey, shaping his decisions and worldview. And so, as the adventure unfolded, John realized that the true magic lay in the connection he formed with Emily and Max, challenging him to become the best version of himself. John was on high alert when he saw Emily, the lost girl, sitting on the cave floor. Her gaze, filled with fear and despair, made his heart race. He would need to be strong, but the pressure of the situation brought his insecurities to the surface. He had always felt inadequate, a mere dreamer in a world that seemed to have no place for him. Now, standing before Emily, he felt even smaller. I will help you, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Max was by his side, as always, but even the dog seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Emily looked at John with hope, but also with a hint of distrust. She didn't know this boy, and the cave felt like a labyrinth of shadows, where the exit was not clear. I don't know how I got here, Emily replied, her voice trembling. I was just playing in the woods, and then everything went dark. Are you sure we can get out? Hearing her words, John felt a wave of empathy. He also knew the feeling of being lost, of feeling like an outsider. "Yes, we can do it. We'll find our way back," he assured her, though a part of him was unsure. The responsibility of protecting Emily weighed heavily on his shoulders. As they tried to find the way out, the cave seemed to close in around them. Each step echoed, and the darkness appeared to swallow the light coming from the narrow entrance. John was determined, but he also felt fear growing within him. What would happen if they couldn't get out? What would he say to Emily's mother? These questions tormented him. However, it wasn't just the cave that posed challenges. Following a path that seemed promising, they encountered a steep drop. John hesitated, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had never faced such a dangerous obstacle before. What twisted in his chest was a mix of anxiety and determination. "I can't let anything happen to her," he thought, looking at Emily, who was watching the situation with wide eyes. "If I can't get across, who will?" He took a deep breath and, with a surge of courage, began to descend the drop, gripping the uneven rocks. With each movement, he remembered his childhood, when he felt powerless and invisible. But there, for Emily, he felt he could be more. Max, ever loyal, followed him, helping to encourage the girl to come closer. "Come with me," John called, extending his hand. Emily hesitated, but the determination in his eyes made her take a step forward. She took his hand, and together they began to descend slowly. However, the path was treacherous, and in a moment of distraction, the rock beneath Emily's feet slipped. "Watch out!" John shouted, pulling her close, but the pressure of keeping her safe caused him to lose his balance. John and Emily fell together, sliding down a steep stretch before crashing onto a firmer ground. The impact made John's breath escape for a moment, and the pain in his body made him question if it had been a mistake. But looking at Emily, he saw that she was okay, just scared. "Are you all right?" he asked, getting up and extending a hand to help her. She nodded, but the look of panic was still on her face. "Come on, we need to keep going," he insisted, his voice firmer now. But doubt began to creep into his mind. Were they really capable of getting out of that cave? With each challenge they faced, John questioned his own inner strength. He felt like an imposter, a boy who had never truly been a hero. As they moved forward, they found a new chamber, where ancient relics were scattered. The beauty of that place contrasted with the fear they still felt. But John's curiosity drove him to explore further. He recalled the stories he had heard about treasures and adventures, and the possibility of discovering something extraordinary rekindled his spirit. Yet, the weight of responsibility for Emily still lingered. It was then that they heard voices. John froze, his heart racing. What was approaching? Would they be friends or foes? He looked at Emily, who was just as scared as he was. Anxiety took hold of him again. What would they do if they were threatened? How could they face another obstacle when they were already so exhausted? At that moment, John realized that the journey was not just about finding the way back, but about confronting his own fears and becoming the person he had always wanted to be. He looked at Max, who also seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, and at Emily, whose presence made him want to fight even harder. They needed each other, and that connection was the true strength that sustained them in the darkness of that cave. With a deep sigh, John prepared to face whatever lay ahead. He knew that the journey was just beginning, and that together, they could overcome any challenge. The tension in the air was palpable. John prepared to face the voices echoing in the cave, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew the situation could worsen at any moment. Emily, still holding his hand, looked at him with a mix of confidence and fear. John felt a wave of responsibility. It wasn't just his life at stake. Now, he had to protect the girl he had found lost in the darkness. The voices were getting closer, and he gestured for Emily to hide behind one of the rock formations. Max, the loyal dog, positioned himself next to John, as always, ready to defend his friend. The voices became clearer, and soon two figures appeared a little ahead. John couldn't see clearly who they were, but their posture seemed threatening. They were talking in a low tone, laughing and pointing at the relics scattered around the chamber. Possibly treasure hunters, John thought, his stomach tightening. He knew he needed to act quickly. If they discover us, everything could end badly. Adrenaline pulsed through his veins as he tried to formulate a plan. What could he do? He was just a boy, lost in a dark cave, trying to protect a scared girl. "We need to go back, John," Emily whispered, her gaze fixed on the approaching figures. The fear in her voice was evident, and it made John's heart ache. He wanted to reassure her, but at the same time, the idea of retreating felt unacceptable. They had to move forward. They couldn't let insecurity take over. With a surge of determination, John decided they needed to move. He motioned for Emily to follow him, and with Max leading the way, he began to silently distance themselves from the voices. But as they moved, the ground beneath their feet started to tremble slightly, and small pebbles began to roll. John stopped abruptly, adrenaline coursing through his body. What was happening? The fear of the cave collapsing on them was real. "Quick! We need to get out of here!" John shouted, his voice echoing. He wasn't sure if the figures had heard them, but he couldn't afford to wait. With Emily and Max behind him, he started running down a narrow tunnel that opened to his right. The darkness seemed to close in around them, and the pressure of the small space made his heart race even faster. As they ran, he felt the air becoming denser and the humidity rising. The cave walls seemed to close in, as if they wanted to swallow them. John struggled to keep calm, but his breathing was becoming quicker and quicker. He glanced back and saw Emily struggling to keep up, her small feet slipping on loose stones. Fear began to grow inside him again, a feeling of helplessness that had accompanied him throughout his life. What if I can't protect her? That question echoed in his mind. As he turned a corner, John spotted an exit ahead. A faint beam of light shone at the end of the tunnel, and he felt a surge of hope. "We're almost there," he shouted, encouraging Emily to follow. However, what he didn't realize was that in running, he was moving away from the safety that the darkness provided. The voices that had seemed distant were now much closer. He could hear laughter and conversation, and it made him hesitate. "John, what's wrong?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. I don't know," he replied, insecurity creeping in again. "Maybe we should go back and try to find another way." But Emily seemed more determined. "No, we need to get to the end. I trust you." Her words were a balm for his insecurities, but doubt still lingered. What would happen if they couldn't get out? What if he failed? As they moved toward the light, John felt the pressure increasing. The voices were closer now, and he knew he needed to decide quickly. The light ahead seemed like a beacon of hope, but also a risk. He looked at Max, who was alert, and at Emily, who was waiting for his decision. "Let's go forward," John decided, although insecurity still consumed him. Together. He remembered what he had learned so far. Strength was in unity, and at least he wasn't alone on this journey. With one last look at the darkness behind them, he moved forward, guiding Emily and Max toward the light. Whatever was to come, they would face it together. As John moved toward the light, his heart raced, filled with hope and determination. Beside him, Emily walked briskly, her hand firmly in his, and Max followed with his nose up, alert to any movement. The light ahead seemed promising, but a part of him still hesitated. What if this light brought more dangers? He thought. However, Emily's confidence encouraged him to keep going. As they approached the exit, the light grew more intense, almost blinding. John stopped abruptly when they finally crossed the threshold of darkness. What he found on the other side was not what he expected. Instead of freedom, they were in a small courtyard surrounded by tall stone walls, and the only exit seemed to be an old wooden door, covered in moss. The sunlight hit the door, but there was no sign of life. There was no clear path, only an unsettling silence. "John, what are we going to do?" Emily asked, her voice trembling once again. Fear had returned, and John could see the worry on her face. This made him feel a chill in his stomach. He wanted to be the hero, the protector, but at that moment, he felt lost. Looking around, he realized they were surrounded, and the voices that had once seemed distant were now echoing again, probably from outside the courtyard. "Maybe we should try that door," he said, pointing to the exit ahead, but as he approached, he noticed the door was locked. He pulled the doorknob, but it wouldn't budge. Frustration began to grow inside him. Why does it always have to be so hard? He thought, the pressure increasing in his chest. "There's something written here," Emily said, pointing to an engraving on the wood. John leaned in and read aloud. "True wealth lies not in what you possess, but in the connections you make along the way." The words resonated in his mind, making him pause to think. What did this mean for him? He had spent so much time seeking treasures and adventures, but he had never considered what truly mattered. "John, are you okay?" Emily asked, noticing he had fallen silent. He looked at her and saw the concern in her eyes. What he had always wanted was to be brave, to be a hero. But as he looked at the girl beside him, he realized that true bravery was not just facing the unknown, but also taking care of those you love. "No, I'm not okay," he admitted, his voice faltering. "I was so worried about being strong that I forgot what really matters. I always wanted to find treasures, but what I really have here is much more valuable." He looked at Emily and Max, feeling a deep love for them. This was what he truly wanted to protect. In that moment of clarity, the ground beneath his feet seemed to shift, as if the cave itself was responding to his revelation. What had once seemed like a dead end had now turned into an opportunity. He needed to find a way out, but not alone. He turned to Emily, with a new focus in his heart. "I can't do this without you," he said. "If we're together, maybe we can figure out a way to open this door." Emily's eyes lit up, and she nodded her head. "Together," she repeated, and at that moment, John realized that friendship and loyalty were the keys that could open any door, even those that seemed locked. With this new determination, John lifted his head and began to examine the door more closely. Max, ever loyal, started to sniff around as if sensing something was about to happen. John took a deep breath and remembered the skills he had learned during his adventures. He crouched down and began to look for a way to unlock the door, while Emily helped him by pointing out the parts that looked different. After a few minutes of their combined efforts, something stood out. A small mechanism, almost invisible, was hidden at the bottom of the door. With a firm motion, John turned the lever and heard a click. The door slowly swung open, revealing a path that led out of the courtyard. "We did it!" Emily exclaimed, her face glowing with joy. John felt a warmth rising in his chest, and for the first time since they entered the cave, a genuine sense of hope. He realized that although there were still challenges ahead, he was no longer alone. Together, they could face anything. As they crossed through the door and entered a new world, John knew that on this journey, he had not only found a way out, but also a new perspective on what it meant to be strong. True wealth lay in the friendships he cultivated and the courage he showed in facing his fears, and that, more than any treasure, was what really mattered. John felt a wave of relief when the door opened, but that feeling was quickly replaced by a mix of anxiety and excitement. The new path ahead was narrow and shrouded in shadows, despite the sunlight shining behind them. The atmosphere around them felt charged, as if the outside world was waiting for them. With a look of determination, he took Emily by the hand, while Max, excited, ran ahead, sniffing the air. As they moved forward, John realized that his heart was still racing, but now it was a beat of hope, not fear. He looked at Emily, who was walking beside him, and felt a new responsibility. Now more than ever, he wanted to protect her and ensure that they were both safe. However, the awareness of this responsibility brought with it a pressure he hadn't expected. "Do you think we're safe now?" Emily asked, a bit hesitantly. Her voice was low, but John could hear the concern. He paused, looking into her eyes. "I don't know," he replied, trying to be honest. "But we have each other, and that makes a difference." Emily smiled slightly, but uncertainty still hung in the air. John knew that their journey was just beginning. They were out of the cave, but that didn't mean the dangers had disappeared. He remembered the voices echoing from outside and felt a shiver down his spine. They continued walking, and soon they reached a fork in the road. To the left was a path that seemed to lead into a dense forest, where the trees intertwined to form a kind of dark tunnel. To the right was a clearer path, but covered with loose stones, leading down a hill. John hesitated, feeling the weight of the decision. "Which way should we go?" he asked, looking at Emily. She looked between the two paths, unsure. "Maybe we should go through the forest," she suggested. "It seems safer, and maybe we can find some shelter." John wasn't so sure. The forest looked threatening, but the path to the right seemed even riskier. He wanted to be the hero she believed he was, but doubt began to consume him. He felt paralyzed for a moment, unable to make a decision. "Let's go through the forest," he finally decided, his voice more firm than he felt. "Whatever awaits us, we'll face it together." Emily nodded, and they moved forward. As they walked, John couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. The forest felt alive, with the sounds of birds and the rustling leaves. But there was an intensity in the air that made him uneasy. He remembered the message on the door. The connections they made along the way were the true wealth. This idea lingered with him, but it also brought a weight. He needed to remember that he was not alone, that Emily and Max were by his side. Suddenly, a loud noise broke the tranquil silence of the forest. John stopped, heart racing. A group of creatures appeared among the trees, with bright eyes and long snouts. They were like wolves, but larger and more ferocious. They surrounded John and Emily, and Max, protective, stood in front, baring his teeth. "Stay behind me," John said, his tone turning serious. He knew he needed to protect Emily, but the truth was that the presence of the wolves filled him with fear. He had never faced anything like this before. The wolves howled, and John realized that they were merely defending their territory. The fight or flight instinct began to kick in, and he felt an urge to run. But then, something inside him calmed. He remembered his words. It took courage and connection, not just brute strength. "Emily," he said quietly, "trust me. Let's try to talk to them." "Talk," she repeated, surprised. "Do you think they will listen?" "I don't know, but if we try, maybe we can find a solution without fighting." With a hesitant step, John approached the wolves, raising his hands in a sign of peace. They watched him, but did not move. It was a tense moment, and John's heart raced. He began to speak, his voice firm but gentle. "We're just passing through. We don't want to cause any trouble." The wolves seemed to relax a little, tilting their heads. John continued to speak, trying to convey sincerity. Over time, the creatures began to slowly back away, as if understanding that they were not a threat. When they finally moved away, a sigh of relief escaped John's lips. He turned to Emily, who had wide eyes. "You did it," she said, amazed. "You really did it." John smiled, though he was still surprised at himself. He realized that courage was not just about facing dangers, but also about finding ways to connect, even in the toughest situations. "That's what matters," he said, as they continued walking through the forest. "We have to remember that we're together, and that we can face any challenge as long as we stay united." This new perspective brought a sense of lightness to the weight he had felt before. Although challenges still lay ahead, John was determined not to let fear stop him again. Their adventure was just beginning, and now he knew that, together, they could face anything. John took a deep breath as he continued walking through the forest, now more confident after the encounter with the wolves. The experience had taught him that true courage was not just about facing danger, but finding ways to connect with the world around him. He felt a new weight in his heart, no longer of fear but of hope and determination. Beside him, Emily walked more relaxed. The admiration in her gaze made John feel stronger. He realized that, in addition to protecting Emily, he also needed to be an example for her. The responsibility that once seemed overwhelming was now transforming into powerful motivation. He wanted her to see that even in the face of adversity, there was always a light to be found. As they moved forward, John began to reflect on his life before this journey. He had always been cautious, avoiding risks and hiding behind invisible walls he had built himself. The fear of failure had kept him from embracing new opportunities. But now, as he faced real challenges, he began to understand that each mistake could be a chance to learn. He thought about how he had hesitated before approaching the wolves, and how that hesitation had almost led them to an unnecessary confrontation. It was a clear sign that he needed to change the way he viewed situations. With a clearer mind, John decided it was time to leave the past behind. He no longer wanted to be someone who ran away from difficulties. He wanted to be someone who faced his fears, someone who learned and grew from each experience. Looking at Emily, he saw that this transformation was not just for him, but also for her. He wanted her to know that life was made of ups and downs, and that facing challenges together made each achievement even more meaningful. However, as they walked deeper into the forest, a new difficulty arose. The path was becoming steeper and harder to traverse. The trees were denser, and the shadows seemed darker. John began to feel the pressure again. He worried about the possibility of not being able to lead Emily to a safe place, and anxiety started to seep into his thoughts. "John, are you okay?" Emily asked, noticing the change in his expression. He hesitated before answering, but knew he needed to be honest. "I'm a bit worried. The path is getting harder and I want you to be safe," he admitted, his gaze drifting among the trees around them. Emily stopped and looked at him. "But you've already proven you can protect us. Remember the wolves. You found a way to deal with them, and I trust you." Those words touched John deeply. He realized that even in moments of uncertainty, Emily believed in him. This gave him a new boost. He couldn't let fear take over. With renewed focus, he took a deep breath and smiled. "You're right. Let's keep going. If we can face the wolves, we can face anything," he said, regaining confidence in his voice. They continued to climb the trail, and John began to apply the lesson he had learned. Each step they took was a step toward overcoming their fears. He started to see the beauty around him, the rays of sunlight filtering through the leaves, the songs of the birds, the feeling of the cool wind on his face. The forest was not just a place of challenges but also of wonders. With that, he realized that true wealth lay in the experiences they were having, in the memories they were creating together. As they progressed, John also began to reflect on the friendships he had cultivated. He realized that the bond he had with Emily was far more valuable than any material possession. The strength they found in each other was a form of wealth he now deeply valued. He wanted to continue building that friendship, to support and be supported. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of climbing and challenges, they reached a small clearing in the forest. The spot was lit by the sun, and a small spring of water bubbled up from the ground. It was an unexpected and welcoming oasis. John felt the weight of his worries dissipate as he looked at the scene before them. "We made it," he said, with a wide smile on his face. Emily smiled back, and Max, who had been attentive until then, now seemed to relax as well, drinking water from the spring. There, in that clearing, John understood that each challenge brought them closer together. He had found a new perspective on life, one that encouraged him to face his fears instead of hiding from them. He realized that, despite the difficulties still to come, he had Emily by his side, and that together, they could overcome any obstacle. As John and Emily recovered in the illuminated clearing, The tranquility was abruptly shattered by a noise coming from the dense forest. A loud, threatening crack made their hearts race. John immediately turned, his gaze fixed on the source of the sound. He knew the calm might be short-lived, and the forest had its own dangers. "Stay behind me," he said to Emily, his voice firm but with a slight tremor that betrayed his nervousness. He positioned himself between her and the direction of the noise, ready to face whatever was approaching. Max, the dog, began to growl, his muscles tense, like a spring about to be released. John felt the adrenaline coursing through his veins, a mix of fear and determination. He remembered the wolves, how he had found a peaceful solution to that encounter. But now, the situation was different. The sound drew closer, and with it came the feeling that he would need to act. The bushes rustled, and suddenly, a figure emerged. It was a boar, large and robust, its eyes shining with a mix of curiosity and challenge. John knew that although it wasn't a predator like the wolves, the boar could be equally dangerous if it felt threatened. "Emily, don't move," he whispered as he tried to assess the situation. The boar seemed more interested in exploring than attacking, but their presence certainly bothered it. John took a deep breath, recalling his new approach to challenges. He couldn't let fear take over again. Calmly, he began to move slowly, trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. "Max, stay," he commanded, as the dog looked at him, its protective instincts conflicting with obedience. He didn't want Max to charge at the boar, which could turn the situation into a confrontation. "I'm here," he said to Emily, who was watching him with wide eyes. She had confidence in him, and that ignited a spark of courage within him. He couldn't fail now. With a gentle movement, he began to speak to the boar, his voice low and soothing. "Hey, friend, we're just passing through. We don't want to fight," he said, trying to convey an aura of peace. The boar stopped, its expression shifting from distrust to curiosity. John continued to speak, trying to maintain a calm and controlled tone. He remembered the lessons he had learned from the wolves. Communication and empathy could be powerful tools. The boar hesitated, seemingly considering the presence of the two. John seized the moment to move a little to the side, opening space as if inviting the animal to pass. To his surprise, the boar began to approach, but not in a threatening way. It seemed more curious than aggressive. Emily, who had been tense and watching everything, finally breathed a sigh of relief. "You're doing it, John," she murmured, her admiration evident. This small word of encouragement made him feel stronger. John knew they were at a decisive moment. The boar came closer, and in an act of courage, John slowly crouched down, extending his hand as if offering something. The animal hesitated, but after a moment, it moved forward and sniffed the palm of his hand. It was a simple gesture, but for John, it was a powerful symbol that understanding and connection were possible even in the face of fear. When the boar finally decided to walk away, disappearing into the forest, a deep sense of relief washed over John. He stood up, turning to Emily, who had bright eyes. "We did it," he said, a wide smile on his face. "You did it. That was amazing," Emily responded, and the joy in her voice filled John's heart with pride. They had overcome yet another challenge, and more importantly, he had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. As they walked away from the clearing, John reflected on the journey they were on. He realized that each challenge made them stronger, not just individually but also as friends. The friendship between them was solidifying, and that moment of tension had only deepened the bond they already shared. He remembered all his failures, how he had hesitated in the past, and how he now felt freer. He was learning to trust not only in himself but also in the people around him. Life was full of uncertainties, but with Emily by his side, he was ready to face whatever came. That day, John didn't just overcome a challenge. He discovered his inner strength and the importance of connecting with the world. And so, as they walked through the forest, he knew that true wealth lay in lived experiences and cultivated friendships, and that each step brought them closer to a bright future. As John and Emily continued their walk through the forest, the echo of the encounter with the wild boar still resonated in their minds. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden light through the trees and creating dancing shadows around them. John felt a mix of relief and euphoria. He had faced a fear that had followed him for a long time, and it had transformed him in ways he was just beginning to understand. "You were really amazing back there," Emily said, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "I never thought you could calm a wild boar like that." John smiled, a bit embarrassed but very happy with the compliment. "I just did what I thought needed to be done. I didn't want him to feel threatened, just as I didn't want to feel threatened by him." He paused for a moment, looking at the leaf-covered ground. "I guess I realized that instead of reacting with fear, I could try to understand." Emily nodded, her eyes shining with admiration. "It's easy to let fear control us. But you showed that it's possible to choose a different approach." She stopped and turned to him. "Do you feel different now?" John thought for a moment. "Yes, I feel stronger. Like I've discovered something about myself that I didn't know existed. I've always been afraid of situations like this, but now I realize I can handle them, and I'm not alone. You're here with me." He smiled at her, and the connection between the two felt stronger than ever. The walk continued, and the forest seemed less threatening now. The birdsong and the rustling leaves brought a new rhythm to their journey. However, as they passed through a clearing, John couldn't help but think about the lessons he still needed to learn. He had faced a physical challenge, but the internal battle was still ongoing. "Sometimes, I wonder if I'm really capable of handling all of this," he confessed, looking at the horizon. "What if next time I can't? What if the next challenge is bigger than I imagine?" Emily stopped beside him, placing her hand on his shoulder. "John, we all have moments of doubt. The important thing is that you've already taken a giant step. You faced a fear that seemed so big, and you succeeded. And if something harder comes up, you'll handle that too, because now you know you can." Her words resonated in his mind, and John realized that the journey they were on together was more than just a series of adventures in the forest. It was a process of growth, and each challenge overcome was shaping not only who he was but also the relationship he shared with Emily. "I want you to know that I'm here for you. Always," John said, feeling a new sense of responsibility. "If there's anything I can do to help you, I will. I'm not just here to face my fears. I want to face our fears together." Emily smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "That means a lot to me, John. We all need someone by our side, and I promise I'll be here for you too. Together, we are stronger." As they continued walking, John realized that his perspective on life was changing. He no longer saw the forest as a place of dangers, but as a space of opportunities. Every tree, every shadow, every corner could bring new challenges, yes, but also new learnings. The sun began to hide behind the mountains, and the forest was illuminated with a soft, magical light. He knew that new adventures awaited them, but now he felt prepared to face them. The courage he had found within himself was not just about facing wild animals, but about dealing with the uncertainties of life. And so, as John and Emily left the clearing to continue their journey, they both carried not only the echoes of the recent experience but also the certainty that together, they could face anything life threw their way. The friendship between them had strengthened, and the lessons learned that afternoon would stay with them forever. As John and Emily continued their walk through the forest, the shadows stretched as the sunlight faded. John reflected on how this experience had transformed him. He had faced his fear, not just of the wild boar, but of feeling powerless in the face of adversity. Now, with each step they took, he felt his self-confidence growing within him. "Remember when I said I had always been too cautious?" John commented, looking at Emily. "I think, in a way, that has held me back from fully enjoying life. But today, I connected with something that was dormant within me. It's not just about courage, it's about embracing uncertainty and learning from it. Emily smiled, understanding the depth of John's words. You're right. Life is full of uncertainties, and it's normal to feel fear. What matters is how we choose to deal with it. You allowed yourself to grow, and that is a victory. With these reflections, John recalled earlier moments in his life when he hesitated to take risks. He thought of missed opportunities, friendships that could have deepened, and experiences that never happened because fear paralyzed him. Now, looking at the forest, he realized that each tree, each shadow, symbolized not just challenges, but also the lessons he could learn. I wish I could go back in time and correct some of those mistakes, he confessed, his voice filled with emotion. But now I understand that we cannot change the past. What we can do is live in the present more authentically. Emily held John's hand, a simple gesture that conveyed unconditional support. And that is what really matters. Every day is a new chance to do things differently. You've already started this journey, and you're not alone. We're in this together. The path ahead was becoming clearer, and John's confidence in himself grew with each step. He decided he would not let himself be defined by his fears, but rather by the choices he would make from then on. The true meaning of success, for him, was not the absence of challenges, but the ability to face them with courage and wisdom. As the sky tinged with pink and orange, John looked at Emily and felt a wave of gratitude. Their friendship had solidified during this journey, and he knew she was an important part of his transformation. The connection they shared was not just about adventures. It was about mutual support and collective growth. Let's keep walking and facing whatever comes our way, he said, determined. And if I fall, I hope you'll be there to help me get back up, just as I will be for you. Emily nodded, her smile lighting up the surroundings. I will always be here, John. Together, we can face anything. As they left the forest, John felt that he had not only overcome a fear, but had also found a new purpose. He realized that each challenge was an opportunity to reinvent himself, and that sharing these experiences with someone special made the journey even more meaningful. If you have also faced your fears and discovered something new about yourself, share your story in the comments. Every experience is unique and can inspire others to do the same. Like and subscribe to the channel for more stories that help us grow together. Remember, the journey is richer when we walk it with courage and friendship. Don't put off until tomorrow what you can share today. If this story of courage and friendship touched your heart, leave a like and share it with your friends. Max and John and Emily prove that true strength lies in loyalty and companionship. Want to know what happens next? Subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories, and don't forget to activate the bell to receive our updates. And comment below what you thought of the Magic Cave. Until next time.